Welcome to the Healthy and Wealthy Retirement, where your certified retirement counselor Mark Struthers takes a holistic approach to retirement, going beyond finances and embracing holistic well-being. This YouTube channel will address not just the financial part of retirement, but also the social, the physical, and the emotional parts of retirement. Everything you need for healthier, a wealthier, and a happier retirement. Here is your host, Mark Struthers.
Welcome to the Healthy and Wealthy Retirement. My name is Mark Struthers. I'm your host, and today we are talking about retirement expenses. So retirement expenses are often kind of overlooked. Most people actually don't know what they're spending before retirement, much less have any idea what they're going to spend at retirement or during retirement. So when we work with financial planning clients, we'll spend some time doing it. And that's part of the problem. Most people think, well, I'll figure out expenses in 5 minutes. It's like my son's talking about changing a car tire when they've never actually done it. They did help me once. You're better off spending some time trying to figure out how to do it in advance. And expenses, kind of like changing a tire, is often a lot more complicated if you haven't done it than you think. So coming up with what are you spending at retirement? And quite often that's related to, is it going to be more, the same, or less pre-retirement, usually less? And then how does that spending change? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We use 5 models in order to model how the spending in retirement might change. One is just an inflation adjustment. That is maintaining your purchasing power over whatever time frame, usually around 30 years is what we plan for. So if it's 3% inflation and you're spending $5,000 a month, after the first year, we adjust that for 3%, and that's $5,150. And then after the second year, we do 3% on top of the $5,150. So it's compounding, it's interest upon interest. It's why getting your kids to invest in yourself, getting to invest and save early on, is because you have the magic of time, the power of compounding. Compounding is great when it's working for you, but it's rough when it's working against you with debt, or even keeping pace with spending in retirement when you are not producing income. Wages generally go up with inflation, makes sense. But when you're in retirement, that's not the case. So if you're spending 60 grand at the start of retirement, depending on how long you plan for, you could think in terms of 130, at least doubling. Double roughly. If you do 3%, we don't always use that, double every 24 years, rule 72. Or you could think in terms like 30-year period, you're talking depending on your inflation rate, 140, 150, somewhere in there, just to maintain purchasing power. Folks have a tough time wrapping their arms around that. But most people don't spend that way. So we use the inflation adjustment as the main one, as our benchmark. But we for most folks, we at least show them what it looks like under really reality. The reality that most people spend more at the start of retirement, things taper off, and then other than healthcare, spending usually decreases as you get close to your end of plan, a kind phrase for death. So we did a video on retirement spending smile. Today we are doing one called stages. Both of these will model what is the retirement spending smile that we just described. So early in retirement, spending increases, you're healthy, you're excited, and then decreases as you go forward through time. And then other than healthcare, which we account for separately, spending declines. But the smile is the healthcare on the other side. So again, we account for healthcare separately, but the question is, how do you model in that decline in spending? You don't have to model in a decline. To me, that's a very conservative approach, just because the evidence is overwhelming that most people spend like this. It's a decision you have to make. You want to make an informed decision. That's what financial planning is. That's why you should be looking at least a couple of these to try to say which one is probably me, or which one do I want to go with. If you're really terrified of longevity risk, be more conservative, although realize depending on how you invest, you're probably going to have a lot more money at the end of your plan than you thought, which might be a good thing for you, depending on your goals. But today we're talking about the retirement spending smile, or stages. Retirement stages is one that really kind of does the same thing as the retirement spending smile model, named after the retirement spending smile. It just goes at it in a different way. So if you call retirement spending smile, we just used a lower inflation rate. So your spending increased each year, but gradually, but at a lower inflation rate. So your purchasing power gradually decreased over time. Figure on 30 years-ish, depending on your inflation rate, roughly 30, say 25%. I like that one because we don't know exactly how it's going to play out. So I like that gradual decline. With stages, it takes more of an abrupt approach. So from retirement to age 75, it just has a normal inflation adjustment. So it models the normal inflation adjustment. So if you're retired at 65, it's 10 years of that normal inflation adjustment. But then at 75, it does decrease. The dollar amount decreases 20%, and then you just pick up again with the normal inflation rate. And then at age 85, and you can change these dates. Financial planning software has the ability to, we use Right Capital. We tweak their models to go along with our view or what we think is good for the client. But at age 85, it decreases another 5%. All these numbers can be modeled in differently. For stages, I like this one, like the retirement spending smile first, but this one, I like these numbers. And then it's 85 until death. And you're always using the same inflation rate, the normal inflation rate. Again, we always do account for healthcare separately, but we just have these declines over time. So what would that look like in real life? It's a client that we've used in a number of these where we did this for a 40-something where we had them retiring in 2043 or something at the age of 60. And in today's dollars, they were retiring on roughly about $54,000, I think, a year. So at age 60, it started off, looking forward, it started off with an inflation adjusted amount of roughly $85,000. So, but if we go forward in time, we can see on the normal inflation adjusted amount at age 74 is roughly around $125,000. And that's the same for the retirement spending stages as well, because up until age 75, we keep that inflation adjustment going. But the difference is with the normal inflation adjustment, that just keeps going to 128,000 next year, 132. But you can see here with the retirement stages, we take a 20% decrease and drop it down to $104,000, but then start up again. So very abrupt declines. And there certainly can be abrupt declines in your spending in retirement. Just it usually doesn't happen that abrupt. Does it? For the model's sake, to say, do we get the kind of probability of longevity? What number do we need to get to? It still is not a horrible way of doing it. In fact, when we use Monte Carlo simulations, we often get very similar results between stages and smiles. So there's no harm in this, but when you're thinking about cash flows and what that might look like in the future, this one to me, the changes are too abrupt, but it's not a bad way to go. So if we go to the end of plan, you can see here, and we saw this in other videos, with the inflation adjustment, we get up to roughly $193,000. The end of plan, we plan to age 90 in this case. That's and we use 2.75% inflation, not 3. We've done episodes why I think that's a better rate, and we adjust it every so often based on a number of different things. But for our example, we're using 2.75. So for the stages at the end of plan, we have roughly about $148,000. So right around 20% difference. If you recall from the retirement spending smile, it was about a 25% difference. So you kind of get to the same place. It's just how you get there that's different. And if you're looking at future cash flows in retirement, and think about distributions from accounts, it is going to look different. It could affect taxes differently. And if you are going to try and stick with this, it could affect how you allocate your tax allocation. But this isn't a bad way to go. As we always talk about, financial planning is about making an informed decision. So looking at expenses in retirement, and certainly looking at the inflation adjusted model, but also at one of the models that model in the retirement spending smile, what's probably going to happen to your spending in retirement. We call it the retirement spending smile model or the retirement stages. We might have to think of a different name for the first one because that gets confusing. But if you put a little time into this, you're probably going to have a better chance of having a healthier, a wealthier, and a happier retirement. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Appreciate you.